What if the real message is hidden in what she doesn't say? Not in her words, but in her pauses. Not in her texts, but in her timing. Not in her presence, but in the way she leaves traces behind, just enough to make you wonder. Not every woman who misses you will say it out loud. Some do it quietly, with a photo that feels too polished, a caption that sounds like it's meant for someone who's no longer there, or by showing up in familiar places with unfamiliar intentions. And you pause, not to judge her, but to understand, because this isn't about reading her like a puzzle to solve. It's about seeing her, clearly, softly, without needing to react. Sometimes, the way someone processes loss isn't through words, but through presence. Not always direct, not always clear, but real in its own way. And this is where your strength is tested, not by how fast you walk away, but by how deeply you can stay still and listen, not to what she says, but to what she's not saying. Because behind every casual "hey" sent late at night, behind every unexpected appearance or sudden curiosity about your life, is a quiet question she may not even know how to ask. Do you still remember who we were? Do I still live somewhere inside you? This journey isn't just about her missing you. It's about understanding the space between you. What it meant, what it still means, and what to do with that meaning now. So before you respond, before you return, and before you even think of walking away for good, pause. Because this might not be about getting someone back. It might be about finally seeing her and yourself with new eyes. And from that place of clarity, only then can you decide, do I still want to reopen what was, or have I simply come home to who I've quietly become? Number 1, she becomes more active on social media. It starts quietly. No dramatic post, no confessions. Just a subtle shift that feels almost unnoticeable unless you're paying attention. She begins to post more often. At first it seems harmless. A picture here, a short video there, maybe a selfie with a caption like "good vibes only" or "you're just living." But you know her, you've seen her in moments of real happiness. And somehow this feels curated, too curated, like she's speaking to someone who isn't in the frame, like she's reaching for a presence that's no longer there. Yours. This is how the absence of connection often whispers, never in words, but through action. Stoicism teaches us to observe quietly, to not react to appearances, but to understand the root of things. And if you've walked away in silence, choosing to protect your peace rather than play emotional games, then what you're seeing now is not just a social update. It's a signal, a silent one. People don't broadcast their lives to the world unless they want someone to watch. And while her followers see beauty, strength, adventure, what you see is tension, a subtle shift in tone. She's glowing, but the light feels forced, like someone trying to convince herself of her own caption. What you're witnessing is a form of reaching out, without reaching out. When a woman misses you but refuses to say it aloud, she often turns to the stage she knows. You still glance at her profile. She might not dare to call, but she'll leave traces, digital breadcrumbs scattered across her stories, designed not to be too obvious, but also not easy to ignore. And they all whisper the same unspoken question: do you still see me? You might notice cryptic quotes, lyrics laced with meaning. Everything happens for a reason. Healing takes time. Some things are meant to be, even if not now. None of it says your name, yet somehow it's all about you. That's the paradox. She wants you to notice without appearing like she wants you to. It's the dance of pride and longing, playing out on a public stage with a private agenda. This isn't manipulation, not entirely. It's what happens when vulnerability is too terrifying and ego is too loud. She's not reaching out because she's healed. She's not posting because she's moved on. She's doing it because in her silence, she's hoping the screen between you is thin enough to break. And here is where the Stoic stands firm, not cold, not bitter, just aware. To react emotionally now would be to hand back your power. To chase after a message that was never sent directly is to give in to illusion. So watch without reacting, understand without judging, smile without responding. Because when you remain composed in the face of subtle invitations, you reveal the strength she once underestimated in you. You show her, not through retaliation or attention, but through stillness, that your life does not depend on her recognition. And, paradoxically, that's when the emotional thread she's tugging on begins to unravel for her. The more you don't react, the more questions she asks herself. Not just is he watching, but deeper ones. Why do I care that he's not? What does his silence mean? Have I lost something? Someone I didn't know I valued until now? This is where true absence begins to echo. Not in distance, but in dignity. So if you see the posts increasing, the filters getting warmer, the smiles getting sharper, remember, sometimes the loudest cries for attention are dressed in confidence. And sometimes the wisest thing you can do is stay silent and let your absence speak the truth no caption can hide. Number 2. She intentionally appears in places you used to go together. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? You're out living your life. Maybe you're at your usual coffee shop, the one with the soft lighting and the corner seat you always claimed. Or perhaps it's the park, where the breeze feels a little cooler in the late afternoon, the place that once echoed with the sound of her laughter. And then, almost like a glitch in the rhythm of your day, she's there, not in memory, in the flesh. At first, you want to believe it's a coincidence. Life can be unpredictable like that. But then you see the way her eyes scan the room, the way she hesitates for a second too long, pretending not to see you when it's impossible not to, and in that quiet moment you realize she knew you'd be here. This isn't fate, it's choreography. When a woman begins to miss you deeply, but lacks the courage to reach out directly, she turns to proximity. The idea that maybe, just maybe, if she can be near you again, some unspoken part of the past might stir back to life. She doesn't want to admit she still feels the pull, so she lets her feet speak what her mouth won't. This is what absence does. It turns ordinary places into sacred grounds, familiar corners into what-ifs. It turns walking past you into a kind of penance and a kind of prayer. But don't be fooled by the casual air she puts on. She may laugh louder, dress a little bolder, carry herself like she's never been better. But under the surface, it's not confidence, it's curiosity. She's wondering if she still lingers in your mind, if your heart skips the way hers does, if being near you just once more might awaken something that's gone quiet for too long. And here's where your strength is tested, not in reacting, but in remaining rooted. Stoicism teaches us that control lies not in how the world moves around us, but in how we respond to it. She may try to recreate the magic through shared spaces, but that does not mean you need to participate in the illusion. If her presence stirs something in you, acknowledge it privately, but let your calm be your boundary, because make no mistake, this isn't just a walk down memory lane for her. It's a strategy, a soft maneuver to stir the past without admitting. She wants the future to change. If you approach her now, if you show your heart too soon, she wins back the certainty she's been trying to reclaim. But if you remain still, polite, composed, that silence becomes the mirror she must finally face. And that's when everything changes. Because proximity without connection is haunting. You can be inches away from someone and feel 1,000 miles apart. And when she stands there close, enough to smell your cologne, but far enough to feel your restraint, it confronts her with the truth. Your presence is no longer hers to summon. She may smile, act surprised, or even say something light like, "Fancy seeing you here." But deep down, her heart is asking a very different question. Does he still think of me when I'm not around? Is there a version of us that still exists? And your lack of desperation, your self-possession, is the most honest answer you can give. There's beauty in letting people walk into the same places and discover that the doors they once had access to are no longer open. Let her feel that. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. You're not here to perform, you're here to live. And if the universe brings her near, it's not your duty to react. It's your test to remain anchored in your own peace. Let the place remember you as calm. Let her memory of you now be one of stillness, presence, and a quiet dignity that cannot be shaken by surprise encounters or unfinished stories. That's the kind of presence that lingers long after you leave the room. Number 3, she reaches out indirectly with subtle messages. It doesn't start with an apology or a confession or even a clear sign of missing you. It starts with a whisper, a short message, a social media like, a reaction to something you posted weeks ago. Nothing bold, nothing obvious. Just a slight knock at the door of your awareness. It could be a text that reads, "Hey, this reminded me of you." Or perhaps it's a photo she comments on, something that has nothing to do with her, yet suddenly she's there, making herself visible again. To the outside world, it seems innocent. But you know better. Because when someone truly wants to reconnect, but is too guarded to face the weight of that desire, they send signals wrapped in casualness. And these signals, they're not random, they're calculated. They are the language of the emotionally restrained, the silent plea of someone who wants to be noticed but not exposed. You see, when you pulled away, when you stopped trying, stopped checking in, stopped explaining yourself, something shifted. Maybe she told herself you would come back. Maybe she believed ignoring you would give her control. But when the silence persisted, it did something she didn't expect. It made her think. And when the thinking became too loud, she reached for the only thing that still made her feel close to you. Interaction. Even if it had to be disguised. This is the moment where a man grounded in purpose and clarity must choose wisely. Stoicism reminds us to see things not as we wish them to be, but as they are. And what they are is this. Her message isn't really about the content. It's not about the meme or the old photo or the memory she brought up. It's about reopening a door without admitting she ever closed it. The subtle message is not, "I missed this video." It's, "Do you still think of me?" Not, "This made me laugh," but "Do I still make you feel something?" And the danger here is simple. If you respond too warmly, too quickly, she gets what she needs. Validation, reassurance, power. Suddenly, she can retreat again. Because now she knows you're still there. She still has access. But if you respond with cold politeness or choose not to engage at all, the tension builds. Not for you, but for her. Because silence, when intentional, becomes an echo chamber of self-reflection. And the less you feed the illusion, the more the reality begins to dawn on her. You're no longer available in the way she remembers. And that quiet revelation strikes deeper than any argument or explanation ever could. This is where your inner discipline matters most. She's testing the waters, not to reconcile, but to see if she still holds space in your world. But you're no longer a man driven by impulse. You've learned that not every knock at your door deserves an answer, especially when the visitor isn't ready to speak the truth. Her subtle messages are not invitations, they're investigations. And sometimes the wisest thing to do is let her wonder, let her imagine you read the message, thought about it, and still chose your peace. That's a power not born of ego, but of alignment. Because the truth is, the more you don't react, the more she feels the weight of what's missing. Not just you, but the safety, the presence, the emotional mirror you once were. And in that void, she begins to see not just what she's lost, but how much she once relied on you to feel seen. A woman who truly doesn't care won't reach out at all. She won't like old photos. She won't bring up shared memories. She won't attempt half-hearted conversations masked as coincidences. But when she does, when she starts showing up through pixels and subtle lines of text, you'll know. It's not the message that matters, it's the motive, it's the longing beneath the words she doesn't dare to say, and you just sit still, calm, composed, stoic. Because some messages deserve silence more than answers, and some memories are better left unanswered when peace is the life you've chosen over chaos disguised as love. Number 4, she asks about you. Through mutual friends, when silence becomes too loud and indirect, messages go unanswered, the heart begins to seek new paths. Not always boldly, not always honestly. Sometimes it tiptoes through the voices of others. That's when she starts asking about you, but never to you. It could be as casual as a quick question to a mutual friend. Hey, have you talked to him lately? Or maybe it's buried in a conversation that's meant to be about something else entirely. How's he been doing? Is he still going to that place we used to hang out? And just like that, she's pulled you into the room without ever showing up. At first glance, these questions seem harmless, polite, perhaps even accidental. But in truth, they carry weight. Because someone who is over you doesn't need an update. Someone who has moved on isn't curious about the chapters they're no longer writing in your life. But she is. And curiosity is never neutral. It's rooted in a longing, in a question that haunts her quietly. Has he forgotten me yet? What's happening here is subtle, but powerful. She's reaching for answers without exposing herself to rejection. She doesn't want to send a message and risk being ignored. She doesn't want to call and feel the sting of your indifference, so she chooses a safer route. She sends out a scout, your mutual friend, hoping they'll bring back something to ease her unrest. But this act, this indirect inquiry, reveals far more than she realizes, because behind every "how is he" is a deeper question. Is he still hurting? Is he struggling without me? Does he ask about me too? And if the answer comes back too calm, too steady, if your name is mentioned without bitterness, without longing, without hesitation, that's when it stings the most. Because in her mind, part of her believed that you'd still be in that same emotional space, missing her, waiting wounded. But if your friend tells her that you've been well, living, thriving, not chasing shadows, her world shakes because now she's forced to face a possibility she wasn't ready for. Maybe he's truly at peace without me. And that's where the pain deepens. Not because you hurt her, but because you didn't collapse without her. In a world where many expect closure to come through confrontation or long conversations, Stoicism offers a quieter kind of closure, the kind that needs no words, just presence, just dignity, just a man who, when asked about, inspires a story of calm rather than chaos. And your job, if you've chosen this path of self-respect, is not to perform for the whispers. It's to remain consistent. Let her hear through the echo of your absence that you've not only survived the silence, you've grown through it. So what happens next? She might ask more questions. She might dig deeper. She might try to decode your every move through second-hand stories. But the more she searches, the more she realizes she's looking for something that no longer belongs to her, because you are no longer a version of yourself that waits for her attention to feel seen. And this shift in power isn't about revenge or pride. It's about wholeness. It's about living in such a way that even when people mention your name, they feel the weight of what they lost. Not because you made them feel it, but because you chose not to chase them to prove your worth. Let her ask. Let the world carry your name to ears that once took it for granted. And when they do, may it sound like peace, not bitterness, not regret. Just a reminder that the man she once left behind didn't disappear. He just chose himself. Number 5. She begins to show regret through social posts or casual messages. Regret doesn't always enter the room with a loud apology. Sometimes it seeps through in quiet phrases, subtle gestures, and late-night thoughts, disguised as harmless words. You see it first in a caption, simple, vague, and yet it sticks with you. Some lessons come too late, or maybe it's a lyric she never would have posted before. One that carries the weight of something unsaid. I wish I'd loved you better. No name, no direct address, but you feel it. Because when regret finally cracks the surface, it rarely walks through the front door. It finds back roads, detours, and digital whispers. She might send a message about a memory, something seemingly trivial. Remember that time we got caught in the rain at that street market? It sounds innocent, but make no mistake, this is not nostalgia for its own sake. This is a test, a signal, a soft echo of, do you still feel something when I mention us? And here's what's most revealing. She didn't reach out before, not when things were fresh, not when the pain was loud. She waited until the silence made her restless, waited until your absence became a presence in her life. One she could no longer ignore. Now, the mask begins to slip. She told herself she was fine. She convinced others she was thriving. But something didn't align, because healing doesn't require reminders. Moving on doesn't need breadcrumbs. Yet here she is, dropping digital confessions into the air, hoping they land where your attention still lingers. Regret, when unspoken, becomes an emotional performance, not for the world, but for you. She posts not just for engagement, but for meaning. Every quote, every shared lesson, every reflective post is a carefully constructed mirror, one that she hopes you'll look into and see yourself. And here's where your discipline matters. Stoicism teaches us that we are not to be moved by external forces. Not praise, not blame, not even longing wrapped in the soft clothing of a familiar voice. Your role is not to decode every word. Your peace doesn't require answers, because true growth is when her regret no longer defines your value. It's When you can read the words, see the signs, and feel no obligation to reopen doors you had the strength to close, still, you'll notice the shift. The timing, the tone. Her words now carry a softness, an unfamiliar vulnerability. She might even admit small truths. I could have handled things better. You didn't deserve how things ended. But these aren't confessions of love. They're reflections of loss, not necessarily a desire to rekindle, but a recognition that she let something meaningful slip through her hands. And what happens next depends on you. You could reply, open the door, soften your stance, or you could breathe deeply and remember that sometimes regret is not an invitation, it's a consequence. Not something you're required to fix, but something she must carry on her own. Because if she truly values you now, that feeling must come without conditions, without you proving your worth, without you responding to every breadcrumb just to ease her guilt. She's learning what she didn't understand before, that silence is not punishment, it's space. And in that space, people confront themselves. So let her sit with her thoughts. Let her post and wonder if you saw it. Let her message and wait for a reply that may never come, not out of cruelty, but because she needs to feel the weight of what was lost and what cannot be regained simply through reflection. You are not a ghost for her closure. You are a man who chose clarity over chaos, and when regret finally catches up to her, let it remind her, not of who you were, but of the man you became the moment you stopped waiting for her to see your worth. Number 6. She becomes emotionally unstable or easily agitated. At first, she seemed unshaken. After the silence settled and the distance grew, she appeared to carry herself with ease, strong, untouched, like none of it had ever mattered. Like you had become just another chapter, read, closed and forgotten. But strength that is only worn on the surface eventually cracks, and this is where things begin to shift, not outwardly at first, but internally, in the quiet, private places. She doesn't show the world. Her reactions grow sharper, her patience shorter. The weight of what she's suppressing begins to leak through the seams of her everyday life. You start to hear things, not from her directly, but through the echoes of her circle. She snapped at me for no reason. She's been different lately, moody. She just blew up over something small. It doesn't make sense on the surface. Nothing new has happened. The world around her hasn't changed. But internally, the war has begun. Because emotions don't disappear just because you refuse to name them. They wait, they simmer. And the longer they are ignored, the more violently they return. And when she feels your absence, not just physically but energetically, her entire emotional compass starts to spin. The truth is, she never expected you to stay silent this long. Never imagined you'd hold your ground, that you wouldn't chase her, that you'd choose dignity over drama. And this realization doesn't just bruise her pride, it unsettles her sense of control. That's why she begins to lash out, not necessarily at you, sometimes at her friends, her job, herself, anything and everything that feels safer to confront. Then the real reason she's unraveling, and here's what makes this moment so delicate. If you do happen to cross paths with her, she may not greet you with softness. In fact, she may be cold, short, even hostile. You'll be tempted to believe she's over you, that her distance is proof of detachment, but it's not. In Stoic wisdom, we're reminded not to measure truth by appearances, for often the ones who appear most indifferent are the ones burning the most inside. Her emotional volatility is not a sign of healing. It's evidence of inner turbulence. She's angry, not because you wronged her, but because you didn't crumble without her. You didn't react to the posts. You didn't take the bait. You didn't come back to soothe her uncertainty. And now, the feelings she tried so hard to bury are erupting, and she has no map to navigate them. Understand this. A woman who has truly moved on feels no need to prove anything, no need to provoke, no desire to manipulate perception, but one who still feels something, conflicted, confused, heart-wounded, will often act in ways even she doesn't fully understand. She's caught in the space between regret and resentment. She misses the comfort of your presence, but resents how calmly you've embraced your absence. She mourns the loss of control she once had, the way your heart once responded to her voice, the way you once made her the center of your inner world. But that version of you no longer exists. You are no longer a man who dances to the rhythm of someone else's inconsistency. You've learned that love, if it is not grounded in peace and mutual respect, becomes just another storm. And storms, no matter how intoxicating, eventually pass. So when you see her acting out, don't retaliate, don't explain, don't try to rescue her from the emotional fog she's created. Let her feel it, let her wrestle with what it means to push someone away who had the strength to walk and never look back. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. This is not your burden to carry. Her emotions are not your responsibility to balance. You gave her space to heal, to reflect, to reach out. What she does with that space is on her. Stay grounded, because while she may be losing control of her emotions, you are gaining mastery over yours. And that, in the end, is what separates the one who seeks peace from the one who fears it. Number 7, she begins hinting that she's not truly happy. She said she was doing fine. She smiled for the pictures, posted sunsets with poetic captions, laughed in the videos with friends. Her world looked vibrant, full, forward-moving. But lately, something's changed. The light in those photos dimmer, the words in those captions heavier. The energy she once used to project strength, it's starting to betray her, because when a woman begins to realize that letting you go didn't bring her the peace she expected, it starts to show, not in the obvious ways. She's too proud for that, but in the little cracks between her sentences, in the pauses that weren't there before, in the way her public joy starts to feel a little forced. You'll start to see it. She shares quotes that sound more like cries for help than reflections. Lines like, "Sometimes the ones who smile the most are hurting the deepest." Healing doesn't always feel like progress. Some nights the silence is the loudest sound. She won't say your name, she won't say "I'm not okay," but that's exactly what she's trying to say. Without having to say it, she's hoping you're still watching, hoping you'll read between the lines, hoping you'll see the sadness she's trying to hide beneath her strength. But here's the truth you've come to understand. Not every emotional signal deserves a response. Stoicism teaches us to discern between what belongs to us and what does not. Her sadness, her regret, her yearning, they may be real, even sincere, but they are hers to face, not yours to fix. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially if your heart still holds even a fragment of care. You'll want to reach out, to comfort, to remind her she's not alone. But that urge, it's not love, it's habit. A reflex born of old roles, not current alignment. And so you hold steady, because you also remember when you needed her, when your heart reached out in silence, she was quiet. When you pulled away to protect your peace, she didn't chase. She chose her ego over connection. And now that the emptiness is echoing back to her, she wants you to fill it without asking you directly. That's not healing. That's deflection. You'll notice how she starts sharing more about loneliness. Maybe she posts a song about missing someone. Maybe she casually mentions how hard it is to trust people these days, or how nobody really understands her. It's not directed at you, but you know it's about you. She wants you to reappear, not just to soothe her, but to silence the voice inside her that keeps asking, what if I lost something good? What if he really was the one who saw me? But if you return too soon, too softly, she doesn't have to face those questions. She doesn't have to reckon with her own choices. She gets comfort without accountability. And that is not love. That is avoidance. So what do? You stay grounded. You listen with your eyes, not your emotions. You observe her patterns, but you don't fall into them. You recognize that her journey is hers now, and your peace is no longer negotiable. It's not your job to save her from her own silence. You already did your part. You loved. You showed up. And when it was no longer received, you walked away. With dignity. Now, as she begins to crack under the weight of her own pride, you don't gloat. You don't lecture. You simply remain calm, present, whole, because sometimes the deepest realization comes not from being rescued, but from sitting in the quiet long enough to feel the full consequence of letting something true slip away. She'll feel that. And in that space, she'll begin to understand that happiness isn't found in proving you wrong or pretending she's unbothered. It's found in the reflection that only silence allows. Number 8, she tries to make you jealous. There's a shift. Suddenly, her world looks full again, suspiciously full. Photos of her out with people you've never seen before. Laughter captured. In bars she never used to enjoy. A new guy in the background, or worse, next to her, close enough to make a statement, but never close enough to confirm anything, and you recognize it for what it is. This isn't love blooming, it's a performance. Jealousy is a tool people reach for when they feel powerless, and when a woman feels your absence pressing in, when she realizes you're not playing the game anymore, she may choose to provoke rather than confess, because to admit she misses you, that requires vulnerability, but to make you feel what she's feeling, that only takes a carefully staged photo and the hope that you're still watching. She may even say things to mutual friends like, "I've been talking to someone new," or post captions like, "Moving on feels good." But her eyes tell a different story. Jealousy is not born from peace, it's born from a wound that says, "I'm still affected by your silence, and I need to know you are too." So she weaponizes what once was sacred, connection, intimacy, affection, and turns it into bait. But you've grown, and a man who is anchored in his own worth doesn't bite. He doesn't chase shadows or respond to provocations designed to stir the ego, because true strength is not reactive, it's composed. It sees the strategy and chooses stillness. In the philosophy of Stoicism, we are reminded often the only thing we can control is ourselves, our reactions, our decisions, our inner world. And this moment is one of those tests. Will you let your emotions dictate your response, or will you let your clarity lead the way? If you allow the scene she's performing to get under your skin, she wins back control, not over your heart, but over your attention. And that's all she's really after. She wants to know, am I still in his head? Does this new guy bother him? Will he text me now? get angry, say something. But the deeper truth is this: if she had truly moved on, she wouldn't need you to know anything at all. People who are at peace with their choices don't announce them. They don't try to trigger reactions. They don't manufacture moments just to feel seen. The moment she goes out of her way to show you someone else, she reveals everything you need to know. She's not over you, because if she were, she wouldn't need to make you feel anything. She wouldn't care if you saw. And that is the clearest sign of all. So when she tries to make you jealous, don't flinch, don't spiral, don't fall into the old roles where your emotions were hers to command. Smile internally, not because you're amused, but because you see the truth now. Her games are loud because your silence is powerful. Her need to provoke you reveals just how deeply your absence has unsettled her. You are no longer the man who competes for attention. You are no longer the boy who fights for a space in someone's life. You are a man who knows his value and doesn't need to prove it by reacting to someone else's fear of being forgotten. Let her play her cards. Let her wear her smiles. Let her chase the appearance of moving on. You just keep living, keep growing, keep choosing peace. Because the moment you stopped playing was the moment you became free, and nothing she posts, says, or does can take that freedom from you, not unless you hand it back. Number 9, she appears where you usually are, pretending it's accidental. You're not doing anything extraordinary, just moving through your routine. Maybe it's your regular stop at the cafe you've always liked, or the gym where you find your rhythm in solitude. The place is familiar, predictable, safe, and then you see her, not planned, not invited, but unmistakably present. She doesn't walk straight to you. She doesn't say your name. Instead, she lingers in the corner of your vision, acting surprised when your eyes meet. There's a smile, brief and rehearsed, a look that says, "Oh, fancy seeing you here." But you know, this wasn't a coincidence. She remembers your routines. She always paid attention, even when it didn't seem like it. And now, with no messages returned, no signs from your end, she's taken the next step. If she can't reach you emotionally, she'll try physically, not with closeness, but with presence. Because sometimes, when the silence becomes unbearable, the heart will take desperate measures just to feel seen. To the casual observer, she's just passing by. But to you, this is the moment you realize she's trying to enter your space again. Not by asking, not by apologizing, but by existing where you are, hoping your walls will come down without her having to say a single vulnerable thing. This is a delicate game. She's trying to gauge your reaction without risking rejection. If you light up, if you engage her with softness, it confirms she still has a place in your emotional world. But if you remain calm, unshaken, kind but clear, it forces her to face something she's been avoiding, that she no longer has access. And that realization doesn't land all at once. It comes in waves. It shows up in the quiet between conversations, in the empty seat across from you that she used to fill, in the fact that even though you're both here, the connection you once shared is no longer within reach. This is where Stoic strength becomes more than philosophy. It becomes posture. You don't respond with coldness, but with presence. You don't ignore her existence, but you no longer allow it to define yours. You greet her, if at all, with stillness, because you know if you chase this moment, you re-enter the cycle. You validate her method. You say, without words, that showing up uninvited is enough to regain your heart, and that's a dangerous precedent to set. A woman who shows up to reclaim a connection without humility isn't ready for reconciliation. She's looking for reaction. And as someone who has chosen peace, you know reaction is the first thing you must sacrifice. So you hold your ground, you sip your coffee, finish your workout, continue your conversation, and you let her presence be exactly what it is: noise that used to be music, a shadow that no longer casts over your soul. Let her feel what it's like to be near you and no longer own space within you, because that's when the real impact lands. Not when she receives anger or affection, but when she receives neutrality, when she realizes that showing up isn't enough anymore, that the man she once knew isn't waiting for her to return. He's moved forward, and that's where the power returns to you, not because you ignored her, but because you didn't flinch, you didn't react, you didn't allow the surprise to dictate your rhythm. You simply stayed steady, stoic, yourself. There's a quiet strength in not being swayed by the past, dressed in new perfume. And in time, she will see that showing up late to a life she once had doesn't guarantee her a seat at the table anymore, because the door she once left open with her pride, she now finds locked by your peace. Number 10, she begins comparing other men to you. There comes a moment, quiet, subtle, and almost imperceptible, when she begins to realize the men she meets now don't measure up. It doesn't happen on the first date or even the second. In fact, at first, she might tell herself she's ready, that she's moved on, that new faces and fresh conversations are exactly what she needs. And for a while it works. The small talk distracts her. The smiles feel like progress. The attention, new and unfiltered, gives her a sense of momentum. But then something familiar breaks through the noise. A phrase, a gesture, the way he looks at her but doesn't see her, the way he listens but doesn't hear what lies beneath her words. And in that moment, her heart stirs. Not with affection, but with contrast, because slowly, without meaning, she starts measuring them against you. At first it's small. He doesn't laugh like he did. He doesn't challenge me like he used to. This conversation feels hollow. She tries to shake it off, tries to remind herself that it's just new, just different, but the truth becomes louder each time she pretends it isn't there. She misses the depth, the understanding, the unspoken connection that made everything with you feel just a little more alive. And that's when she begins to compare. She compares the way you spoke, with intention, with presence, to the way these men talk, scattered and self-focused. She compares the way you observed her, truly saw her, to the way they glance, without knowing what they're looking at. She remembers how your silence once said more than other people's paragraphs. And the more she compares, the more she realizes it wasn't about what you did. It was who you were. You were patient where others are restless, still where others are reactive, sincere where others are convenient. And above all, you were grounded, while most float from one moment to the next, unrooted. In Stoic thought, we're taught that the highest virtue is character, not charisma, not charm, not words laced with desire, but a soul anchored in values. And what she's discovering now is that the kind of man who walks away to protect his peace leaves a mark that can't be duplicated, not by status, not by looks, not by effort, because what you offered wasn't found in the surface. It was in the depth. This realization doesn't come all at once. It creeps in when conversations feel forced, when dates blur together, when laughter rings hollow because it lacks meaning. She starts replaying the moments with you, the ones she didn't treasure at the time, the ones she now wishes she could. return to, just to feel something real again. And that's the irony. She left thinking there would be more, that there would be better, that her future would hold someone who would outshine you. But she's slowly learning that certain people are irreplaceable, not because they were perfect, but because they were present in a way that others are not. And you don't need to know these comparisons are happening. You don't need to hear about them, because the echo of your presence is doing the work for you. The point isn't to be missed. It's to have lived in a way that can't be mimicked. To have loved with enough depth that the absence of your energy reveals the shallowness of others. So you continue walking, not with bitterness, not with pride, but with a quiet knowing that speaks volumes. She will keep looking, but not truly for someone new. She's looking for a version of you in people who don't carry your soul. And that search will exhaust her, because what she lost wasn't a boyfriend or a comfort or a phase. What she lost was a man who stood still in a world that spins too fast. And that is not easily found again. Number 11, she becomes more nostalgic than ever. It begins slowly. At first, it's just a thought, a flicker of memory passing through her mind. Harmless, she tells herself. A song that used to play when you two were driving together. The scent of a particular cologne drifting through a hallway. A dish you once cooked for her on a rainy night, and then it happens again. A laugh she hears on TV that sounds like yours. A place you once visited flashing across her screen. A message in her old phone that she never deleted, though she meant to. Suddenly she's not in the present anymore. She's wandering through the archives of your love, one fragile memory at a time. What she told herself was over now echoes louder than ever. The very moments she once brushed aside, casual, common, simple, now feel sacred. And she can't help but scroll back, stare longer, listen deeper. Because nostalgia, when it takes hold, doesn't ask for permission. It arrives with weight, and it asks questions the heart isn't always ready to answer. She begins replaying everything, your voice, your presence, the inside jokes that no one else understood. She even rereads your old texts, not for information, but for energy. She's trying to feel you again, trying to reconnect with the emotion that once filled her days. And in those quiet hours, she stops pretending. The laughter in those memories is real. The calm you brought her, undeniable. The way you understood her without her needing to explain. She hasn't found that again. She may not admit it out loud, but the truth is clear in her patterns. She's looking back because the present no longer fulfills her. And you? You're not actively doing anything. You're not reaching out. You're not feeding the memory. You're simply living. But that's exactly what makes the memories stronger for her, because there's no new version of you trying to overwrite the old. There's only absence and silence and the lingering warmth of what once was. Nostalgia is often romanticized, but what she's experiencing now isn't sweet. It's sobering. She remembers not only the good times, but the way she felt in them. The security, the stillness, the quiet understanding between you two that needed no performance. And as she revisits those moments in her mind, she realizes something she's been avoiding for a long time. It wasn't just that she had you. It was that she was most herself with you. And now that you're gone, a piece of her feels missing. She might post an old photo, something cryptic. Maybe she shares a song that you once danced to. It might look like harmless reminiscing to the outside world, but to you, if you see it, you know. That's not just nostalgia, that's longing. Longing for a moment in time she thought would always be there. longing for a version of herself that only existed when she was loved by someone who saw her fully. And now she's chasing that ghost, not to change the past, but because the present feels empty by comparison. But here's the wisdom you hold. Now, not every moment needs to be revisited, and not every memory needs to be revived. Stoicism teaches us that the past is not to be clung to, but honored. You don't need to escape it, nor should you dwell in it. You acknowledge it, bless it, and release it. Let her feel what she must. Let the nostalgia run its course. You are not obligated to respond to a memory that has already done its job. You lived fully. You gave completely. And the fact that your absence still moves her heart, that is a sign not of unfinished love, but of a love that was real enough to leave a mark. And you keep walking, because while she is traveling backwards, searching for pieces of the past, you are moving forward, quietly, peacefully, building something deeper. Not a memory, but a legacy. Number 12, she finally breaks the silence and reaches out directly. It begins without warning. After all the subtle messages, cryptic posts, rehearsed smiles, and carefully curated appearances, the moment comes. It might arrive in the form of a short text, something casual. Hey, how have you been? Or I saw something that reminded me of you. But don't be fooled by its simplicity. That message carries the weight of all the silence that came before it, because reaching out directly, that wasn't easy for her. It took more than just courage. It took days of inner wrestling, nights of scrolling through your name in her contacts, thumb hovering over the keyboard, wondering if she should say something, anything. And when she finally did, it meant she couldn't take it anymore. She could no longer bear the ache of the unknown. The silence you left behind became louder than any conversation you ever had. And now, she's crossing the distance between you, not with flowers or fireworks, but with a quiet line that says everything she was too proud to say until now. The irony is that this is what she swore she wouldn't do. She told herself she'd stay strong, that she wouldn't be the one to reach out first, that if you didn't chase, you didn't care. But time has a way of clearing the fog, and in your absence, she discovered something she didn't expect. It wasn't you who failed to show up. It was her who failed to stay present. Now, she wants to reverse the clock, not by rewriting the past, but by testing if there's still a door left open. But here's what matters most right now, how you respond. Because this moment, it isn't about her, it's about you, about the man you've become during the silence. The man who didn't chase, who didn't flinch, who didn't need someone else's attention to know his value. You've already done the hard work of healing, of growing, of choosing peace over chaos. And now, with her words in front of you, you stand at a crossroads. Do you open the door again? Or do you let her knock echo back into the silence she once created? There is no right or wrong answer, only alignment. Stoicism doesn't tell you what to feel. It simply teaches you to lead with clarity, to act not out of emotion, but from a place of intention. So ask yourself, are you responding because you miss her? Or because you miss who you were with her? Are you answering her message because you believe in what could be rebuilt? Or because the past still whispers promises it never fulfilled? Sometimes, when someone reaches back out, it isn't about starting over, it's about finding relief from the pain of what they let go. But love, real love, is not born from guilt. And peace is never found by reopening wounds that have only just begun to heal. So maybe you reply, or maybe you don't. Maybe you meet her words with warmth, or maybe with silence. Maybe you say, "I'm glad to hear from you." Or maybe you simply read the message, breathe deeply, and keep walking. Because the message she sent isn't what gives you closure. What gives you closure is the quiet knowledge that you never needed her to say it for you to feel complete. You gave your all. You stood your ground. And whether she's back out of longing or regret, the truth remains. You grew through the absence, and now you no longer depend on her presence to validate your worth. She finally reached out, but you already arrived. Final reflection, she reached across the silence, and for a moment everything paused. All the signals, the silence, the uncertainty brought to this one quiet intersection. One simple message, one line that tried to hold the weight of everything she never said and everything she now wishes she had. But you didn't need it, because if you've made it this far, you already know. This story was never just about her. It was about you. About the man who chose stillness over reaction, who chose self-respect over reactivity, who didn't need an apology to find peace, who learned to sit in the silence and grow in it, to let go not because he stopped caring, but because he started remembering who he was before he forgot himself. In someone else's story, every sign she gave you, every cryptic post, every chance encounter, every memory she tried to pull you back with, was a chapter in her reckoning. But your role in it was never to save her. It was to outgrow the need to be chosen by someone who once left. You saw her try to stir you on social media. You felt her presence in places that used to hold your laughter. You watched her test the waters with subtle messages and second-hand questions. And through it all, you stayed calm, not indifferent, not cruel, just whole. That's what Stoicism has always taught us, not to be unmoved, but to be unmoved by things that do not serve our highest self. And now that she finally said something, reached across the void she helped create, you're not angry, you're not triumphant, you're just still, because you understand. Closure doesn't come from someone else's confession, it comes from your own clarity, from the realization that love, when real, doesn't require begging or proving or chasing. It lives in presence, it thrives in truth, and when it ends, it leaves behind not just pain, but wisdom. Maybe she changed. Maybe her words now carry the weight they once lacked. Maybe she does regret what she lost, but that doesn't mean you owe her anything, not a response, not another beginning, not even a closure scene. You don't have to be bitter. You don't have to be cold. You simply have to remain what you became, a man who values peace more than attention, a man who walks away not to punish but to protect, a man who, when remembered, is remembered not for how he chased, but for how he stood, still, calm, whole. So if she reaches out again, if she asks to meet, to talk, to explain, you don't answer from your old self. You answer from the place you fought to find, the center of your truth. And whether that answer is a quiet, "I've moved on," or a softer, "I wish you well," let it come from strength. Because at the end of this story, what truly matters isn't that she came back, it's that you have come back to yourself.